This is The Right Approach. I'm JW Judge, and with me is my co-host, Barbara Hinsky. This is a podcast for writers to learn more about the craft and business of writing as we explore a new topic every week. Our guest today is Kellie Coates Gilbert. She is the USA Today bestselling author of several series of women's fiction. Her biography on her website is amazing. And just go to her website, kelliecoatesgilbert.com, and look at that biography, and there is no shortage of personality there, and I loved it.
And
Right.
I want to, I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute, just to break in and say one of my favorite books from many respects as a reader and as a writer is her first book, Mother of Pearl. And please, everyone, writer, do yourself a favor and read this book. I think Kellie knows I was taking notes on all the beautiful phrases that she used and the clever wording and the wonderful analogies. And I finally gave up because I just didn't have enough time to write it all down. It is a remarkably well-written book and well-crafted and interesting and page turner. And for her first novel, I just want to slap her. But anyway, so Mother of Pearl. Yeah.
That was written back when you didn't have all the editor and reader voices in your head. Do you remember the first book?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
All right. So I think that's a really good jumping in point that I didn't plan. So when you're writing, is what draft, maybe it's the first draft for you, do you start really being intentional about your word choices and your analogies and your metaphors and all those things that make a book sound nice, in addition to telling the story that you're telling? Like, where does that come in for you?
Well, my writing process was pretty unique, I think. I am not a person who does multiple drafts. I write, I get up every morning and I grab a cup of coffee. I am not what you call a plotter, where I plan out the novel. I have some framework in my head, and I've taken years of craft, so I understand how to write a book. But I sit down and I'm reading. I sit down and open and read the chapter before, and then the movie starts playing in my head, and I continue to write. And I write slow. And the reason I write slow is because I am doing the word choices and the metaphors and the things as I go. And I will write a scene and then go back and read it and kind of edit as I go. But when I close the scene and the chapter that night, I rarely go back until it goes through the edit process. And then, of course, I go back and do what my editor suggests I do. But in the writing process, no, I'm a one draft girl usually.
Oh, that's super interesting. Wow. And I think I've heard Dean Koontz's writing process is very similar.
Is that right?
Yeah, so he'll write whatever he's written for the day. Then the next day he'll go back and read it and do his editing then, and then start on his writing for, that day. And then when he's done, he's done. And, it's ready to submit.
Yeah, that's how I am. I don't want to go back through a story I've already written, and I cannot plot it ahead because I would be bored, and I love the discovery. In fact, that's what I call it. I'm a discovery writer. I sit down and as the movie starts playing and different things happen and conversations start happening, that's the fun part.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because I have a framework. There's a spreadsheet, it's a whole thing. Yeah. I don't have it all filled in as I go, in the novel. And Barb, we haven't talked in a month, I don't think, but the novel that I just finished, my fifth one, I hardly knew any of the characters when I started writing. I didn't know very much about it at all. But I started writing it, and then I would fill in ahead of myself as I went. And then eventually I had the whole story figured out. When I was halfway done, I knew about how everything was going to go. But for me, it continually changes. Even when I was in the last few chapters, wrapping things up or getting close to it, things were still changing. And I'm open to that. I'm good with it and it's fun, but I don't think I could keep all of that just in my head and not have it written down somewhere.
Yeah. And it's
Well,
funny
you
because
also,
my life isn't like that. I need a map. When I drive somewhere, I need a map. But my writing is different. What about you, Barb? What do you
well,
do?
and I was going to say Jeremy's book was a mystery thriller, so that's uniquely hard to pants. He's world famous for his spreadsheets. So I'm more, I think if I just woke up and didn't know what was going to happen with my characters that day, that would be really intimidating to me. I have a general idea where I'm going and what my plot arc is going to be. But in terms of the specific scenes to get it there, I usually develop those in my head, start them in my head when I'm walking my dogs in the morning. So that I think there's science behind that, moving arms in opposition and all of that stimulates your creativity. So that gets me up, especially now it's 118 in Phoenix and it's hot. You have to get out with your dog at literally at 4:10 and be done by 5, or you just can't do it. That's a lot. But the fact that I'm currently writing a book and I need to do that, or I won't know what I'm putting on the page that day, moves me forward. So maybe I'm a little bit between you. But I'm better at not needing multiple drafts. My first book probably went through 10 drafts, and now I go through 2 before I send it off for professional editing. But my second book is the land. Yeah.
Sorry. I have collected a lot of nuggets along the way from writing instructors and fellow authors. And one of the things that I love is Donald Moss. He's an agent who does a lot of craft instruction at conferences and such. And I took a workshop from him, and he said, you need to take a look at where you're at, identify again what the character wants, and remind the reader through the prose what the character wants, and then make it worse and put up the roadblocks and always say, what would make this worse? And in A Mother of Pearl, the one that you were talking about, that was pretty easy, because I kept saying, well, what would make it worse right here? And then, and then that was a clear path, because she went through a lot.
She did.
Well, I like to hear that. I'm sorry, I jumped in on you there.
No, go ahead, go for it.
I was going to say, I like to hear that advice of just make it worse, because the book I just finished, all the way through the 3rd act, like it was rough. these folks had a hard time, and it just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
All right. So when I was doing my research on you before this interview, I was looking at your books, and your books have high ratings across all of your series, which shows me that you are meeting reader expectations. So is that something that you are conscious of, that that you're aware of and trying to do as a part of your writing process, or does that come into play at all?
I mentioned a little earlier that the first book was easier to write because you didn't have the editor and the agent and the reader voices in your head. And that continues to be true for me. I do write for my readers, but I am my reader. And so I know that if a story is pleasing me, it's likely to please my readers. I love women's fiction. It is a genre that I adore. And I love romance, and many of my women's fiction stories have romance plots, but they're all integral to her changing. And the way I see women's fiction is a character comes in one way and she leaves changed, and the events in the story change her. And that is usually what I pre-plan. I am a person, I'm very visual. So the very first thing I do is I people my novels by going out and getting pictures of celebrities or other things. And I look at the pictures and go, oh, okay, well, she's going to be my protagonist. Okay. And then this is going to be a supporting character. And I start putting, and I print them and I start putting them around. And then I start thinking about those pictures and who they are and what their little broken places are. And I like to say, what is the lie that they believe and why? And that will inform their change and their emotional journey. And that usually provides a really emotional read, because I love books that make me feel. I want, if a book can make me laugh or cry or be worried or scared or thrilled, or then it's a good book. And I really, the worst thing for a novelist is to have someone close their book and went, oh, that was nice. No, I want them to feel something. I want them to believe that they just took that journey and it was an emotional journey and they loved it. And I also like to place it in settings that people might not otherwise visit.
Well, and I definitely want to come back to settings, because I made a note about that. But on peopling your characters, like you described it, Barb, do you do anything along that lines? Do you do any?
I don't, but I'm going to start, and I'm going to start that this afternoon because I'm writing something now. One of my biggest downfalls is I don't put in the details of hair color, eyes, height. I've got a general idea, but I don't like to do that stuff. And, I was just writing yesterday and I thought, okay, well, we have no idea about this character other than their age, in their 20s. So I always have to go back and add that stuff. And I work hard. I get nice reviews from that, but that's because I have tortured myself. And maybe this would be certainly would be more productive, more efficient if I did what you did and just printed out some pictures and had them on my desk and scribbled down what's the lie they believe. That's a genius tip. One of many. That's great.
I think that's super interesting. And I don't do much character description, physical descriptions either. And I'm like you, Kelly, in that I can see the movie playing in my head as I'm writing, and I do it as a reader too. And I have a pretty good idea of what these characters look like, but unless they have some physical characteristic that matters enough for me to put it in, like it's not making it in. And so for my first book, my first novel that I wrote, one of my friends was telling me that they saw the male main character as Mark Wahlberg. And I was like, no, he is not like Mark Wahlberg. That is not the kind of person that he is. But like, I didn't put any guidance in there. So when he's reading it, if that's who he sees, then that's who he sees. And for me, I like to leave that. Well, first of all, I haven't found a good way to just incorporate, physical characteristics that aren't essential. But I also like it when I have that ability when I'm reading to fill in those blanks for myself.
Yeah.
So how much is it?
I was just going to insert, I think there's a point though with both setting and character description that you can advance plot by you can tell the reader something by, in one of my murder mysteries, I have a woman who ends up committing suicide, but her cat is named Mr. Darcy. Okay, that tells you something about her.
Yeah.
And she is an elementary school teacher lives alone with a cat named Mr. Darcy. Okay, those details give you a mental picture. Yeah. And that all seems real easy, but I think Kelly does it better than any writer I've ever read. But that stuff takes a lot of time, but it really advances your plot and your book in an easy way without having to spoon feed it.
And maybe I do that because I'm so visual. I am a visual person and I just need to know what they look like. But I'm with you guys. I don't really care for what I call description dumps of setting or character. Yeah. I mean, those are just, so finding interesting ways is fun. Like, for example, in the setting, in order to bring the setting right to the front page, and I'm not going to take credit for this. This was my editor's idea and I loved it. In the very first book in the Sun Valley series, she was listening to a radio broadcast and it was broadcasting the local weather in Sun Valley, Idaho. So then it set it in Sun Valley, Idaho without saying, oh, by the way, the book's set in Sun Valley. So
All right. So
That's great.
I saw that you have series in Texas and Idaho and Hawaii and the West Coast, I think. What kind of research do you do to make sure those settings have the specificity that they need to feel lived in and authentic and not just set pieces in a play?
Oh, this is one of my favorite parts. I mean, I love crafting characters, but second to that is always my setting. And it's because I grew up in a tiny little farm community, not very far outside of Sun Valley, Idaho. And I was a book girl when I was little. And we didn't travel. We were farmers. We were sheep ranchers. But I went to Charleston through through Gone with the Wind, and I went to Europe, and I mean, you know, and those images in my head, and we didn't have a lot of TV, and we didn't even have a movie theater in town. So books were it for me. And I love to travel, and I love to travel inside the pages of a novel. So I love to take my readers places. And I wrote the Sun Valley series because that's where I grew up, and I wanted people to be introduced to the historic Sun Valley Lodge. Ernest Hemingway spent a lot of time there. In fact, he wrote most of For Whom the Bell Tolls in room 26 of the Sun Valley Lodge. He ended his life in Ketchum, Sun Valley area. My cousins were the pallbearers at his funeral. There is a memorial to Ernest Hemingway, and that is the setting for the very first chapter of my Sun Valley series. And I just wanted to take people there and describe what it was and tell them all about the lodge and its history. And I do think my readers have really, really loved that. I grew up on a sheep ranch, so I had the father be a sheep rancher so that I could introduce those kinds of things for the readers and take them and let them know what it's like to grow up on a sheep ranch. It was kind of the Yellowstone before Yellowstone television came out. And then in Texas, I actually did that when I very first moved here, and went to each of the metropolitan cities for a week with my husband. And I love to use real places, like in A Woman of Fortune, when the feds show up to arrest Tuck. It's at the Adolphus Hotel, which is a real hotel downtown, a very historic hotel. So I went and I described it, and they let me explore and spend the day there. And then when the book came out, they did a book signing at the Adolphus. And so that's, you know, an added plus is that you can use that synergy there to promote your novels. When I went to Maui, I stepped off the airplane, smelled the plumeria, and went, oh my gosh, this is the next place. Oh, that book, that's my longest running series, and I couldn't hardly bear to end it because I loved spending every day in Maui. Yeah. In fact, I wrote it with a plumeria candle, which isn't quite the same as the plumeria, but oh my gosh. Yeah, I love setting.
I have written, my first novel was set almost exclusively in Birmingham, and then my fourth one was partially in Birmingham. And you know, I use play. It's not a city that a lot of people know. I mean, most people that are familiar with Birmingham is because they traveled through on I-65 on their way to the beach. And so felt like I'm getting to introduce people to this place.
Yeah.
And parts of it that you wouldn't see or know otherwise. And it sounds like the same thing for Idaho for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, John Grisham did a wonderful job of taking towns in the South and places that he was, Biloxi and different things. And Pat Conroy, I mean, goodness sakes, you know, if you want to know the South, you start reading authors. And so Jeremy, it sounds like, you know, you have that same passion to bring your readers to the South, and how else are they going to come and enjoy? And I think that stories pull you into a location and a setting unlike movies, because you can see it through the person's eyes and what they're thinking and feeling and enjoying. And food, I also put lots of local restaurants and food so that they're really immersed in the place.
One of the things, talking about these settings, I noticed that your covers on your series are so cohesive, and they so effectively convey to the reader what they're getting. And each one is easily identifiable as being a part of that particular series. What goes into that on your end?
You know, I've been blessed so many ways as an author, but one of the biggest deals for me personally was early in my career. I met Debbie Maycumber, and Debbie Maycumber is a prolific author of women's stories. You cannot go to a Walmart or a Target or anything without seeing Debbie's books. And I reached out to her and just wrote her an email and said, I'd like you to mentor me. And that's what this will look like. And I gave really clear parameters so that she knew that I wasn't going to overimpose. And I said, I just would love to have you help me as I start out on this journey. And she did. We met for 2 years, and she was the queen. I know. She was the queen of branding. She is a person who says you must be branded. She told me something that I just really, really loved. And that is, she said, if you need to buy some tomato soup, you don't go to the mall, you go to a shopping center. And then you don't go into the hardware store, you go into the grocery store. And then when you get in the grocery store, you don't go to the produce section, you go to the aisle where the soup is. And then when you get to the aisle where the soup is, the blue cans are Progresso, the red cans are Campbell's. And each has a little different flavor, even though it's soup. And you need to identify yourself with colors and look and branding. And she just drilled that into me. So you'll notice that most of my covers are primary colors. Same as this. Everything I do, what I wear, everything is primary bright colors. It depicts happy and hopeful. And yet, you know, I think the stories are depicted by the characters and the feel of the novels, but those things just are always playing in my head. So thanks to Debbie Maycumber.
You know,
that is incredible that you had the chutzpah to do that. And of course, I know you and your background in legal stuff. And of course, it would have been a perfectly crafted email. So kudos to you.
Well, and I'm a big fan of mentorship, and I have been poured into, and I feel the obligation to pour back. I can't help everyone, but I usually have one person a year that I mentor, because Debbie did it for me, and I want to do it for others. And I think we have an obligation to do that for people coming into our industry.
Good for you.
I think it's so interesting that the conversation has taken this turn, because I've been thinking a lot. I mean, in my legal career, I had mentors, and I've been thinking a lot about mentoring within writing. And I was going to email Barb about, should we do this as a topic? And I didn't yet. And here the conversation is. It's just kind of funny how it went that way. But most of the I don't even think of them as traditional mentoring relationships that I've had as it pertains to writing, have been one-sided, in that I have been listening to particular authors for years on their podcasts, you know, like Joanna Penn, and or people like James Scott Bell, who I've been reading their books on craft for years. And, you know, I don't have a relationship with those people, but I have learned so much through them about craft and business of writing. But I haven't had a traditional mentoring relationship. So it sounds to me like you are obviously a big advocate for that. Other than someone having the just temerity to reach out to someone they don't know and ask, what are ways that you think are effective means of seeking that out?
I think that getting involved in organizations is a really good thing. For example, I was a member of the American Christian Fiction Writers for a long time. I was a member of the Women's Fiction Association, WFA, for a long, long time. I'm now, you know, in lots of little author groups, but that's where you kind of gain entree to a lot of talent and authors. And that then opens the door for you to ask. I think just a blind email might be difficult. My email to Debbie wasn't blind. I met her at a conference and was introduced to her. And then I asked her. So that would be my recommendation is get involved in author organizations. There are a lot of really good ones out there. I understand there's a really fabulous thriller organization out there that a lot of people are members of, in the thousands of authors.
Yeah, Sisters in Crime is maybe what you're thinking of, or maybe not, but that's a really great organization. And, you know, I was thinking this could be, and I think we're too late to do it this time. Maybe you'll consider coming back and we can talk about how you, as an author, what you gain from organizations and conferences and retreats and those kinds of things. Because there's a lot there, but you really need to know how to go about it. You know, if you're a new author and just sign up for ButcherCon or something like that and go into one of these enormous ballrooms with, you know, 5,000 people, chances are it's going to be tough for you. You're not going to get what you should out of it. So, and you're so experienced with that. Would you come back and talk to us again?
Sure, because I love this topic.
Yeah.
First, I love this industry. It's the second career I've had, but I was made for this. I love publishing. All aspects. It's hard. It's hard, but I love it. Every bit of it.
So you've talked about bringing your Hawaii series to a close was a difficult decision. How did you know that it was the right time for you? Like, it was just the right time to close this thing out.
Yeah. That particular series features the Briscoe family, which is Ava is the matriarch and her 4 adult children. Their storylines were just told. And when I say that I have characters that come in one way and they leave changed because of the lie they believe and why, every character they were done. They were done. And I either had the choice of developing and bringing in new characters and such, or moving on. And I just felt like it was time to move on. I will do a Christmas book and I'll do, you know, some novellas here and there possibly, but the Briscoe story was done. Yeah. And now we're going to start a new series in the Tetons, which I just spent a month in Wyoming so that I'd have all those details. And I spent 4 days on a guest ranch. My husband and I, you know, stayed at the guest ranch, worked on the guest ranch. We took some people up on a horseback ride, and I made 42 huckleberry milkshakes one night. And so, wow. I mean, I've got it all in my head. I can't wait to put it on paper and take my readers on a journey with 4 best friends from high school who all come back to the Teton little town of Thunder Mountain and start again.
I love that. When I was in college, my uncle lived here in North Alabama, and I brought some college friends down here, and this old man took us horseback riding for a day, just around all these trails in North Alabama. And he liked to prank people and just enjoy himself at other people's expense sometimes. So, but in a good-natured way. But we had paused to give the horses a rest, and when I wasn't paying attention, he uncinched the saddle for the horse that I was riding, and then told me, run and see if you can jump on that horse and land in the saddle and stay upright. And so I did, but the horse was so sweaty that the saddle stayed on because there was just all that friction. And so it spoiled his joke until he just decided to shove the saddle and dump me off onto the ground anyway. So, but that's I don't think I've been horse riding since, not for any particular reason.
What a great character to write.
Someone,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we let you go, why don't you make sure to tell folks where they can find you, follow you, and keep up with the work that you're doing.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me. You know, writing is a pretty isolated endeavor. And Barb and I are part of a group called My Book Friends. That's a great place to come find both of us. We hang out there and we host every other week there. And it is a place where there's well over 10,000 members now. And we talk books a lot. There's lots of really fun promo things. So Barb and I hang out there. That's a good place to find us on Facebook. My Book Friends.
On Facebook.
Yeah. And then I have a website, kellycoatesgilbert.com. I'm on BookBub and Amazon and Pinterest and all those places where you can find me. And my website has all the buttons. But most recently, I am diving off into a brand new business model that I'm very excited about, and that is direct sales. So I have just, as of last week, have my store up. It hasn't really been announced yet. I haven't told my readers yet, but I'm going to start selling direct. And that's going to be a place where I hope a lot of people will come and visit me. One of the things that'll be really wonderful for readers is, as Jeremy and Barb know, we put our books on retail sites like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Nook, and such, and we're guests on their platform. They sell our books, and they have a certain set of parameters that we have to operate in. We don't get to change our prices on a whim. We don't get to do a lot of discounts easily. We can do that, but there's this big process. A direct store is going to allow me to offer coupons and discounts and bundles that retailers just wouldn't let me do. And so you may find that I will offer a 2-day special with the first book from every series for 2 days with a coupon of 50% off. It's just going to allow me to have a lot of new opportunities to allow readers to come find my books and have discount pricing I'm really excited about it.
Is that where you are going to send readers first?
Yes, I've been advertising. I advertise pretty heavily, but I used to advertise to the retailers. I'll be advertising to my own store primarily now. And it's kellycoatesgilbertbooks.com. And there's a link from my regular website too, but that's my new thing. And I'm pretty excited. I'm a little overwhelmed. You guys know what it's like when in fact, were all of us under traditional publishing contracts first, but I can't remember, Barb, if you were or were not, but even as an indie, I mean, if there's just so much that has to be done and so much information and so much to learn, it can be very overwhelming. And I feel like that again. I'm in the fire hose situation, like, but I'm excited about it.
Well, I've heard so many authors lately who are going that direction with things. And for years, you've been having people tell you need to have your own platform, create your own newsletter list and have your own website so you're not reliant on others. And I think that this is a really smart extension of that. So in addition to all of the opportunities you described, you also have that you get to keep such a much greater percentage of the profits, that it gives you that flexibility. You have the opportunity to control the pricing, but also the flexibility because you're not giving away 55% of it or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a win-win. It's a win for the authors, and it's going to certainly be a win for my readers, I guarantee. And I love my retailing partners. I especially love Barnes & Noble. They have been so good to me. And I mean, even when I was at Trad, they gave me book talkers, and I was book of the month, and they did all kinds of fun things for me. And I will still be at all the retailers, and I love my retailing partners. But this is one more. And last year I translated a bunch of books into German, and I'm selling there in Germany in German. And this is just one more thing that I'm doing, but I'm looking forward to it. And I think my readers are going to enjoy it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, thank you so much for your time and the generosity of the information you shared. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun. For all of you listening, y'all just don't realize that we have the best job ever. I mean, we all kind of came out of legal, didn't we?
Yes.
So, we've had other careers, but.
Well, I'm still in it. I was in court this morning.
So you're still there.
That's right.
Yeah, this is a wonderful gig, and we thank each and every one of you for buying our books so we get to do it.
Absolutely. Well said.